I'm Dan, and welcome to Dan and the Red Hand. So today we're going to cover that episode 6, but we're going to do it from a book reader's perspective. So this is going to be a full spoiler review of episode 6, The Flame of Tar Valon. Let's go ahead and get into it. All right, so let's start with that cold open scene. It's obviously not in the books, but I like it because it gives us a little more development for S-1 Sanche, which is something that you don't get until late in the book scenes or late in the book series or in the prequel, A New Spring. So to get some more hints into her childhood, to let the audience, especially the non-book reading audience, know the kind of character this is, I thought was very effective. Some cool little notes for the book readers. Obviously, this is in Tyr, and this is on the the delta, one of the rivers in the delta, the Fingers of the Dragon, which I really liked. Of course, the whole point of this is to show that Siuan comes from very humble beginnings. She's a fisherman's daughter. He's missing a hand. I don't know if that'll be explained as to why he only has one hand. I mean, it's something that can happen in fishing accidents, especially for throwing a cast net, but it could also be something related to him losing a hand another way. So it'll be interesting to see if they ever touch on that again. Some things that I did notice in there, some of the comments in the back and forth, it definitely shows how Siuan speaks. The whole let's get up, let's catch them before some other bastard does. And, her quick-witted, quick-thinkingness, like, well, fish touch the reflection of the moon every night, so I don't understand. It kind of really tells some of the story of the books, how clever she is, how she can think quickly on her feet, and how she can think around problems. And that's one of the keys, as we know in the books, to her becoming Amyrlin, is her ability to look at things and see patterns and solve puzzles and things in that nature. So on that note, it was very good. Another thing we got to see is we get to see her channel, and we see her channel in a very sophisticated way very early on. Her age is actually more appropriate for what the books have for channelers and girls who are found to have the spark born within them. So that portion I like, because it's not, a 20-year-old, a 25-year-old in the case of, Gwen and Nynaeve channeling for the first time or being guided through their first channeling. This is obviously a much younger girl. I don't know her exact age because I didn't look up the age of the actress, but that is what it is. Nonetheless, there is a departure here because S-1 Sanche had the spark born within her but was not a wilder. And it makes me really wonder if they're even taking that whole route of wilders versus, women who can learn to channel, who have the spark born within them but haven't channeled yet. Really makes me wonder if they're going that route. Nonetheless, it did effectively show that there's something going on with channeling in Tyr, which even in the X-ray stuff says that it is illegal in Tyr. So good on them for showing those aspects of that. Overall, the changes from the book in this scene, even though this book wasn't in the scene, are minor. And, I really like the scene. I love the dynamic between the little girl and then her father. And I thought it was a heartbreaking moment when she had to leave and she's, leaving on that boat with a bamboo pole pushing her along. Now let's go on to that trial. First of all, they gave us a great book nod because Maureen looks very book accurate in this trial. She has her Cassiera. Her hair is done up the way I like, or the way I pictured it. Not necessarily the way I like, but the way I pictured it. And, the costuming looks very, very good. They all those three Aes Sedai look very good there. They clearly have changed some things to their appearance to be a little more formal. And honestly, even Liandrin's braids look more book accurate here than they have so far with them being down and loose. So good on them for that. However, I do have some problems with this scene that we'll get into a little bit later. One additional thing that I do have to say about Maureen's costume, that gold leafing on her ear is freaking gorgeous, and I love it. All right, so if you did not notice, before the scene is even seen, you hear the clang of the Keeper's staff. I thought that was a really nice touch. I didn't realize that until about the third time watching the episode through, but that's how that scene opens. Before it fades out of black, you hear her clang that staff down. So very good. I do like that Lyanna's there. I like the portrayal. I think she's commanding. She's serious all the time, which is perfect for her character arc and where it goes on later. And I think this actress is going to be able to pull all of that off beautifully. Some things that I do have issues with, though, is that staff is not a gilt flame, so there's no gilt flame and Tar Valon on top. But that is a small thing. Another small thing is there's no Keeper Stole. She doesn't have the thin blue Keeper Stole on either. But kudos to them for having her stand during all of these and not partaking in the discussions, because that is actually very true to the customs and that would happen in the Hall of the Tower for the Keeper of the Chronicles. Of course, one of her few lines, she comes, the Keeper of the Seals, the Flame of Tar Valon, the Amyrlin seat, was great right out of the books, perfect for this, but she did miss the last, she comes right at the end. But that's a small thing, and I forgive them for that. Okay, so let's talk about our first look of Siouan Sanche, the Amyrlin seat. I love the attention to detail in this costume. I love how regal and detailed it really is. If there's anything I can say about the costuming team for this series, they have put a lot of time, effort, thought into not just the overall aesthetic, but the minutia, the small details. And I'm going to get into that in later videos. I'll probably do just a costuming video later on after the series is done. But there is a ton of wonderful costuming, and a lot of it has to do with the Amyrlin seat. However, there are also some issues. The first of which being there is no Amyrlin's striped stole with all of the colors of the Aja on it. That being said, they did kind of allude to that or give a nod to the book series with the inside of her collar having a stripe. They're pastel stripes, so they're not very bright, but of each color of the 7 Ajas. So good on them for at least doing that. Another note, I noticed that her ring does not have a blue stone. It has a stone in it, but it does not have a blue stone in it. It actually looks like it's a clear, I don't know if it's a stone or just a setting over something, but it's clear. It looks like it has some design in gold on the bottom. I couldn't get a great screen capture of it, and I haven't seen any really good pictures of it head on, but it looks like that might be that same braiding scheme symbol that we've seen throughout this. And what I mean by that is if you look at the floor, you'll see that they have the, a tile for each of the 7 Ajas. Again, they are muted, but that also depends on what angle you're at. I did notice that when you're at a more floor angle, looking at them at an angle, they seem brighter than the pictures from straight over top in the tower or in the hall of the tower, where those look really muted. But if you see the braiding around that is that same style of braiding that we see in the opening credit scene, and we even see above the Amyrlin's head as well. So very good on that. I think that's going to be what's on the inside of her ring. I think it's to symbolize all of the Ajas. While we're talking about the look of the actual hall, I like it better than I thought I would. I actually like it now better than I do my headcanon, which I can't say for everything in this series, but for these I do. And the reason being is it's small. It's big enough to show gravitas, but small enough to where they would not have to yell to be heard. And with the height, you would actually get reverberation of people speaking fairly lowly on ground level that would travel up, because it's clear that when there's a large audience for the hall, that those floors that are above it are where people would be standing listening. And you would be able to get that with the acoustics of a room like that. So very good on them for that. Additionally, each one of the pedestals or platforms holds 3 chairs for each of the 3 sitters of each Aja, with the exception of the primary one that has the Amyrlin seat on it. Now let's talk about the chair, the Amyrlin seat, real quick, and all the other ones too, but specifically that one. They all look like they're made out of one piece of marble, which is wonderful. It kind of alludes to them potentially being made by the Magic or Ogier. I can't really remember who crafted the actual Amyrlin seat and the seats in the hall. It was one of those two probably, and it really shows that because they are clearly one piece of marble each, which is wonderful. That being said, the Amyrlin seat is supposed to be painted in the colors of all the 7 Ajas. I really think that they're downplaying some of those color schemes. Not necessarily downplaying the color schemes, but when they would all be together, and they haven't done that. You notice on the inside of her collar, all those colors are very muted. They're not bright. They're out there. They're not out there. They're not out in your face. And I think they're doing that for a reason, just to keep things looking more aesthetically pleasing. I know that in the books, this totally breaks from canon, but it would probably be pretty jarring and kind of look funky in this world if all of a sudden you saw all these bright colors that are all together. Just my opinion on why I think they changed it. Another thing they seem to have changed is I don't see any of the sitters or Aes Sedai wearing their Aes Sedai shawls. This is exactly, I know that in the books they don't always wear them, especially if they're traveling or just walking around the tower, but during ceremonies, 100% they will be doing that. During a meeting of the hall, 100% would they be wearing their shawls. Now, the Amyrlin seat mentions the shawl. She says, Leander, you've had this shawl for some time now. Did you forget your training? But we haven't seen them. I'm a little disappointed by that, but also at the same time not too unhappy, because I really do like the look of all the Aes Sedai. I like the attention they're paying to detail when it comes to those costumes. But, I'm wondering if some of my hardcore Wheel of Time Aes Sedai fans aren't getting a little kind of twitchy about the fact that they're not seeing any shawls. A couple other book nods that I really liked was when, after the Amyrlin dismisses Logain, she says, the rest of you may leave may go leaving, or may depart leaving the light, something of that nature. Basically sealing the Aes Sedai trial portion to the hall of the tower itself. That's very good. That's a very good nod to the books. Although, why couldn't she have said, please depart in the light. We are sealing the rest of this to the hall. That would have been a more powerful nod to the books. But, again, that's kind of one of those it is what it is moments. So one thing that did bother me is Liandrin does some things, and there's some showing of it, and I guess maybe it'll come up later. But she clearly shows anger and frustration. She actually stops talking to the Amyrlin, turns around and starts making a speech to the hall of the tower. And on top of that, she calls out that the Amyrlin Sea, the mother, was once a blue sister. Those are three things, at least two of them, that actually go against Tower law when it comes to a meeting in the hall. And one that, if it doesn't necessarily go against Tower law, it really goes against custom. So I'm really surprised there wasn't more brought of that. I know that when she did mention that, the mother was a blue, that Liandrin slams that staff twice. Or not Liandrin, but Leona, the keeper of the Chronicle, slams that staff down twice, which, that's good. That's kind of like that gavel order thing, which I kind of like the fact they're using that for that purpose. All right, so one of the big failures in this trial scene is when Liandrin is questioning Moiraine, saying, hey, why didn't we know that Nynaeve could channel before she healed us? And Moiraine's answer is, I did not know she could channel. That's a little bit of an issue for me. So my first take, I was a little more forceful on that, saying there's no wiggle room for the three O's there. I'm going to take that back and say there is. She did not know she could channel. That doesn't mean that she didn't know she had the ability to learn to channel. So I take that portion back. But nonetheless, that's a close skirting, I know. Words have meanings. Exact verbiage is important, and how we use them matters. But that one's close to plot hole for me. The whole I suspected thing probably alludes to I suspected she was going to be able to channel. I could feel something there, because she did talk to Egwene, like, what do you call it? Women who can listen to the wind. It's the same thing everywhere. It's the one power. So that to me says that Moiraine probably knew that, if nothing else, Nynaeve has the ability to be taught. But it's so close to really breaking the three O's and having a pretty big plot hole there. Nonetheless, it is what it is. Now, the I suspected line, I don't believe is actually talking about her being able to channel. I think she's talking about she suspected that maybe she's ta'veren, which I don't think she's going to be in the series. I know they said that there's a fourth ta'veren there. I think that's going to be Egwene, not Nynaeve. So let's talk about Siuan actually questioning Moiraine. And as book readers, we kind of know where this was going, because we're like, okay, we know too much. But she's asking her, what is the purpose of your search? And you can see Moiraine's first saying, I cannot say. Siuan's like, on your knees, and I'll ask you one more time, what's the meaning of your search? What is the purpose of this? And Moiraine stops, and you can tell that she wants to say something a few times, and I think that is the oaths holding her back from saying something untrue. She's trying to find a way around, the three O's, but not say that I'm out there looking for the Dragon Reborn. She knows that would be disastrous for her and Siuan. And eventually this settles back on, I cannot say again, which I thought was wonderful, because it showed that there's no way for her to get around this without revealing what the purpose is. So she just says, I cannot say, because they were sworn to secrecy, as we know in the prequel, The New Spring. So she's already sworn to secrecy, and if she were to say it, she'd be stilled probably. This, of course, kind of aggravates Siuan Sanche, and she calls her out as, maybe it's your noble blood, Lady Moiraine Damondred, which, yes, that part, just hearing those words said on screen, gave me tingles. I'll admit to it. I was like, I got chills. But good scene there overall, and I love the whole, fact that she's like, when your head and lips touch this marble bed, begging for your mother's mercy. Ooh. That is Siuan Sanche to a T. Even though we know it's a ruse, that was still really well done. So, in keeping with books, at least they're still calling them penances, not punishments. Nonetheless, she says she'll decide on her penance and deliver it tomorrow. And they're all, free to leave. There's a little scene out there, a catty scene with the red clique, the red mean girl clique. But it's nothing of over consequence at this point in time. Nonetheless, there's actually a really cool interaction there between Alana and one of her warders where he hands her, I think it's a fig. So just kind of a neat little interaction there, but nothing, really book spoilery or non-book related here. It was just kind of a scene that shows, hey, just remember these Red Sisters are bitches. Cut past all that, and we get to see Moiraine drinking tea. It's that time. We get to see Moiraine drinking tea, which we see in the books all the time. And if you notice, she's sitting there waiting. And the second that Nynaeve and Loyal leave Mat and Perrin's room, that's when she realizes it's time to go. Of course, Lan can feel that through the bond. He comes down. Yep, time to go. They head over there. Now, a couple things I want to point out here has to do with the Light's Blessing. Now, we said in my last review, that this is taking place of the Queen's Blessing. And yes, that is Basil Gill right there. And this is probably the most book-accurate look that I have seen. All the way down to the pink cheeks. Like, that is super book accurate for him. Also very book accurate in what Moiraine says. Hey, no matter what you hear, she stops in front of the door and says, this is the door. He's like, yeah, you're right. Because she can feel that evil inside of there. And she tells him, no matter what you hear, don't come up. I know there's a little more flowery verbiage there, but that's the essence. And it's actually directly out of the book, so wonderful on that. Nonetheless, she goes in and you have a scene that is very interesting where Rand eventually, thinking that she's going to try to gentle Mat and sentence him to death in his eyes, pulls his sword and Lan steps between them, and with the whole "don't be stupid." It was very much did remind me of some of the scenes in the first book where Lan was very overly protective of Moiraine when it came to the Emond's Fielders, and I just thought that was a good scene. It definitely showed how much better a warder is than a farm boy with a sword. Nonetheless, Moiraine does go over to heal Mat, and he pops up with the dagger. Yet again, that's very similar to the books. I know that not all of the Emond's Field 5, or at least not even the others, are there at this time like they were in the books. But it's a small adaptation that I don't mind. The whole way that she channels the Mashadar out of him, and as it tries to go into her mouth and she puts it back in the dagger, I actually really liked that. Now, here's the things. Here's something I want to talk about. Now, this is definitely a big departure from the books. We know that he carries that dagger around much longer. And yeah, he does get healed eventually in Tar Valon. Moiraine, initially when she heals him in Camelot, is like, I can't heal him completely, but this will keep him going for some time. I believe that they're changing this for a reason. And it's one that I can get behind. So think about it. Everybody who talks about this, and I've heard other YouTube creators who cover Wheel Time content say this too, that Mat with the dagger kind of sucks. Like, as a character, he just kind of sucks. You get to some really great character development afterwards. You get to the Mat that we all know and love after his tie to that dagger is cut off and severed. So I think they are speeding past sucky Mat to get to the better character development for Matcham Cawthon. And I think that's what this is. Does it change the story? Not too much, not really. It just makes some of the things that drag on for a long time and get kind of sloggy. I'm using that word for a reason. Just cutting that down and getting rid of it so that we can move on to the things that we want to see with Mat later on down the road. So overall, is it a change? Yeah. Is it one that I think is terrible? No, I can actually get 100% behind getting my Band of the Red Hand Mat earlier. Then we get that great scene outside on the balcony between Moiraine and Rand speaking, and this is where you get to see Rand start to warm up to the Aes Sedai, warm up to Moiraine Sedai a little bit, and she's like, I would have done it for any one of you. You have these suspicions. He's like, I get it, but I saw you take on that darkness for him, so that shows that Rand's kind of getting on board there, so good job for Moiraine there. Of course, Nynaeve and Loyal walk up, and Nynaeve's just completely antagonistic to her, and she has, Moiraine has that line, if wisdom's going to be the title you claim, I suggest you start using some. So good. Not in the books, but freaking great. So that just goes to show, not just because it wasn't in the books doesn't mean it's not going to be great. But just because it's changed from the books doesn't mean it's a good idea. So we're going to get to some of those other things down the road. But right now, I think the decision overall, not terrible. I kind of like it. The other thing in that scene that I did want to bring up, because I think it means something later on, is she's urging Rand. She's like, hey, that dagger, he he fed off its evil, but it fed off his inner evil as well. You know, you're going to need to keep an eye on him. That's a little bit of foreshadowing, maybe for later in this episode, but also maybe for later in the series. So let's get around to the sauna scene with Maureen and Megan. I actually really like this scene. I like Megan's character. I like the actress. I like the way she's portraying her. She has a certain authority to her. Now, you know, her being a sitter, it is what it is. I don't get mad at little changes like that because they're condensing the amount of characters. So expect to see characters that are going to do multiple things. So it seems like Megan is a sister, but it also seems like maybe she is the one who holds the blue Aja's eyes and ears. So they're combining a couple characters into her, I think, and I'm totally fine with it. And the actress is pulling off. She, like I said, she has an authority to her. She has a seriousness. She has a friendliness too. So it's a very good leadership style that she is portraying. It's kind of a empowerment type thing. It's less task management, although it's come to the point where she's like, look, you know, we have a green sister supporting a red, a blue sister supporting a red. We have Trollocs attacking the west, Loghain in the south. You have Aiel crossing the spine of the world. We have ships going missing in the west. And we have an Aes Sedai who sunk Terran Ferry. You know, just blessing out all these things that are showing the world is changing. It is an upheaval. And I like the way she did that. And she's like, hey, by the way, we went ahead and sent recompense in your name to the Terran Ferry guys, which is exactly what, you know, the Blue Aja would do. So I like that. The other stuff is kind of foreshadowing. We know, hey, I already told you guys there's spoilers in this episode. So if you're still here, you're about to get shit spoiled really bad. So obviously that's the Sanchan. That's the Sanchan. However you want to say it. Ships disappearing in the west, yeah, that's the Kareen. That's the Forerunners. Aiel crossing the spine of the world, we know that they're here looking for He Who Comes with the Dawn, which is their name for their Kar-Karn, who is also the Dragon Reborn. So there is a lot of foreshadowing here that I really am all about. Even to the point that, you know, when Moiraine goes to pick up her towel, she gets that little twig of yellow flowers, and even Megan's like, more secrets? She's like, yeah, a little bit. So it was just really good overall scene. I like it. It was effective. It was a scene that is not in the books. That was a nod to all the book readers, and that I liked. So obviously that little twig of yellow flowers was a nod to, you know, a yellow sister. So a yellow sister who was keeping an eye out for, you know, any of the Emond's Field 5, I think, did find Moiraine, or did find Perrin and Egwene, and leads Moiraine to them. And while she's in, there's a few things that I thought was very interesting. First of all, she doesn't say, yeah, I know where Matt and Rand are. I got them right over here. She's like, I have people looking for them. Don't worry about it. You know, very Aes Sedai answer. When they don't want to tell you something, they're just going to divert and say something else that is true, that is related, but necessarily doesn't tell you what you want. And then says, but I have it on good authority they're alive and well. Yeah, because she freaking healed them and she's seen them. So I like this portion. I would love to see the Emond's Field 5 together earlier, but I like that Moiraine isn't doing that because it doesn't make tactical sense to put all of these people, all these Ta'veren, all these potential targets in the same place right now. And additionally, she has everybody watching her. All the Aes Sedai, you know, eyes and ears are going to be on her, and we find that out later that Landor knows a lot more than she should. So it makes sense for her not to put all of her eggs in one basket. Nonetheless, the scene goes on, and, you know, Egwene's like, yeah, we got captured, or Moiraine brings up, I heard you got captured by the White Cloaks. She's like, yeah, but I took something from them, and hands her back those Aes Sedai rings. So big moment there because they're getting those back. And she talks about real quick, like, you know, it'll be like the injuries never happened. The Yellow Sisters are the best healers in the world. And Egwene's like, yeah, but it's only going to fix what's on the outside. And then she starts talking about, you know, Perrin's golden eyes. They're like a wolf. So she's obviously making those connections. What I like here, and I'm not going to go into the whole scene, is that Moiraine stops her and says, don't tell anyone of this. There are sisters here who would want to do him harm if they knew. I think that is a clear nod to Elias. And here is why. I think we're going to get Elias later on in this series. I think he was cut from the first season for a reason. Hear me out here. Right now, and even later in this episode, she talks about 5 potential Dragon Reborns. It could be any of them. It could be all of them. That being said, we're going to start what's called Dragon Watch, because all these people are on the Dragon Watch list. So in order to keep Perrin on the Dragon Watch list, you need to not explain that what is happening to him, it has nothing to do with the One Power, and it's just something very old come again. So basically, they're withholding the Wolf brother exposition, the explanation, to keep that mystery around. Could Perrin be the Dragon Reborn? It's not a big deal. If you're really, really ticked off about that, I'm sorry, but maybe we get him later, and he can help Perrin. He can explain to Perrin and help explain to the audience what is going on. And I think that'll be much more effective than it just happening out of nowhere at the beginning before Perrin has his interaction with wolves. I think that's actually going to be a much more effective storytelling device later on than it honestly is in the books. So I don't hate that change, and I see why they did it. Now we get to one of the best scenes, or most controversial scenes, if you will, or scene sequences in the show so far, and that is Moiraine in her apartment preparing to go see, Siuan. There's some things that I like here. They gave the nod to her masking the bond, which, as book readers, we all know why that's an important thing, because she's about to have some very intimate dealings that maybe she doesn't want Lan to feel, and vice versa. Maybe it's just like his one time to go get his freak on. So he's not going to, because he said he's going to stand watch while she's gone, which is a very, very Lan thing to do. Of course, there was that great line where he says, be back before dawn. She's like, is that an order? He's like, did it sound like a suggestion? And then they kind of laugh it off, because they have that intimacy between them. They have that kind of relationship where they can do those little inside jokes and little, poking at each other in private. That's not a conversation that would ever happen outside in the hall of the tower or in the tower, but in private in her apartment. I loved it. Nonetheless, we get to see her use that ter'angreal that's on her wall that we saw last episode to open up a portal and meet Siuan. So then you get, Moiraine actually going into this reeded hut that looks very similar to what Siuan Sanche grew up in. So tell me in the comments, do you think that ter'angreal is actually a portal to this particular hut in Tyr? Or do you think it's maybe allowing them to access the world of dreams, Teleron Riad? Let me know in the comments what you think. I'm not entirely sure just yet. That being said, this was a great scene, I think. There was a lot of dialogue that really lets you know them as people, especially Siuan Sanche with her, I hate when you call me mother, or I hate when you call me that. And her sitting there, just the whole scene is wonderful. And it shows that, hey, when do we ever follow the rules? Kind of nodding back to a new spring. So putting you in that new spring headspace right before they start kissing, because in a new spring, it established that they were pillow friends back then. And, there's nothing in the books that says that relationship actually did not carry on. It's just not covered later. So we don't know. So that's not necessarily a departure from the books. And even if it is, I'll tell you what, it's what I'm here for. That being said, after some kisses, Siuan goes in for one more, and Moiraine gives the line of all lines, on your knees. And Siuan gives a smirk and kind of, goes to get down to business. So I guess the turnaround really is foreplay. So after Moiraine and Siuan have sexy time, there's a lot of exposition drops, a lot of things. And I think if there's a couple things, not just for the non-book readers who are watching this to set up the storyline, but I think there's some very subtle nods to let us book readers know a couple very important things. And I think specifically that discussion about the prophecies being 3,000 years old and translated by hundreds of Aes Sedai, and hearing a different story of the dragon in every village, and heard from a gleeman saying that it's going to be a multi-headed dragon. I think that is them looking at us as book readers who know the story, who know the canon story, and saying this is a different telling. Potentially, what you know isn't necessarily true. So I like that. Do I think they're going to change who the Dragon Reborn is? I don't think they are. I don't think they're going to go with the multi-headed dragon thing. But I do think that, that is them telling us, shelve all of your expectations, because there's going to be some differences here. And one of those differences is Siuan saying, yeah, I've had dreams of the Dark One, a weakened Dark One at the Eye of the World, every night for the past month. This is a change from the books, but I'm down with this change, because this is taking all these little foreshadowing hits that we had, and it does seem kind of forced. I'll admit to that. This does seem like it is forced, and it is throwing the Eye of the World storyline at us. But it's to get rid of there's all those. We skipped a lot of traveling. We skipped a lot of traveling where nothing super important to the story happens, aside from like meeting men and I guess the whole Camelin thing. But they're cutting those places out. But along all that route, there's all these little hints. Loyal talks about meeting an Aiel who was talking about the Dark One trying to blind to the eye of the world. I think that was said again to Elias and Perrin. Elias is obviously cut out, so that scene was cut out. So all those scenes that we're getting those hints that eventually when they all come together in Camelin, they all bring it up to Moiraine, and Moiraine's like, wait, we're getting all these hints from the pattern that we need to go to the eye of the world. This is just them condensing that and saying, here you go. The Amyrlin seat is having dreams of the Dark One with the eye of the world. Clearly that's where you need to go. So it's still the pattern forcing them. That's where you need to go. They're just doing it in a different way. So after that scene, we get to see, Lan and Moiraine starting to go towards back towards Moiraine's apartment. And he's like, yeah, I put him there. And she's like, how's Matt? And then Leander comes up. And she's questioning a lot about Matt, Rand, Nynaeve, Egwene, Perrin. She knows way too much about the Emond's Field 5. Maybe it's a network of spies. Maybe she has some kind of insider information. Who knows, but she knows too much. But here's the key here. Moiraine shuts her down by saying, I know the man you meet in North Harbor. I will tell your Red Sisters about her, and you know what they will do. I'll tell them where he lives, and you know what they'll do to him. While I think that this is one of those classic misdirections things, saying, hey, she's, out there having sexy time with a man, and the Red Ajah wouldn't like that. I don't think that's what's happening here. I think this is a Sanchan. We all know what happens in the book with Leandra handing Egwene and Elaine and trying to hand over Nynaeve over to the Sanchan. I think that it's her Sanchan contact who is staying in North Harbor. I don't think he lives there per se. I think he's staying in one of the inns. And I think that's what they're talking about. So I think that's what the hint there. But it could also be other things. I mean, is it the Sanchan? Maybe. Could be a lover. Hell, it could be Podden Fane. It could be another dark friend. Or hell, it could even be one of the Forsaken. We don't know. But my money right now is on one of the Sanchan. There's not a ton of things to take from this scene with Loial other than this. And if you notice Moiraine's reactions with Loial, Builder, glory to the Builders, you honor me. As well as, a couple episodes ago, Last Embrace of the Mother Last Embrace of the Mother line. It seems like they are taking a lot of Borderlander, specifically Shienaran, but Borderlander customs and applying them to Moiraine. And I don't think this is without merit. I think it's an intentional choice, and I think they're doing it because she's been bonded to Lan for the past 20 years. I think that's where that's coming from. I think it's showing the influence of that bond the other way, and it's probably one of those, like, she probably feels a slight affinity to the Borderlands because of her bond, and that's probably why she's doing that. All right, so let's talk about the scene inside of the Amyrlin study. I do think that scene in the Hall of the Tower where Egwene says the Amyrlin seat, that's kind of a nod to the non-book readers, and kind of, haha, that some of us book readers have said this, like, why is the office the same name as the chair? Nonetheless, in the actual Amyrlin study, which is what this place is, because there is no bed, you see that same ter'angreal, and you see Siuan trying to play a different role. So we've seen herself, which is who she is with Moiraine. We've seen who she is as the Amyrlin seat in the Hall of the Tower, and now you're seeing her as more of a laid-back, personable Amyrlin seat. No, come in. I'm Siuan Sanche, the Amyrlin seat. Today, you can call me Siuan. Very kind of trying to put them at ease, get them off their guard, and Egwene's all about it, but Nynaeve sees past it and says, after the whole conversation of, you're the most powerful channeler in 1,000 years, and Egwene afterwards kind of looking dejected. She was all happy. She's like, oh, she's talking about me. That's right. And then she's like, Nynaeve Omer, and you see that look of shock on Egwene's face. And then later when she's telling Egwene, thank you for returning the rings, she's smiling, but then she's kind of like frowning, like she's really unhappy that she came in second. So we have that, and then you have Nynaeve saying something that is that is both very Nynaeve and very not Nynaeve, according to the books. Now that you're done blowing smoke up our asses, why don't you tell us what you want? So everything about that is 100% Nynaeve, except for the statement blowing smoke up our asses. Nynaeve in the books is always getting on people for their language, constantly. Now, yes, and later in the book, she starts to use it a little more, but in the first book, I don't remember it. If I'm wrong, hey, let me know in the comments. I am wrong from time to time. It's fine. But I don't think I'm wrong here. To me, that seems a little out of character. Nonetheless, after that, S-1 gets up and starts talking to them. And now she's getting a little more serious. And she's saying, I know what it feels like. She's basically saying, I know who you are. I'm like you. I come from humble beginnings too. And Nynaeve doesn't know that. And Nynaeve's like, don't talk to me like you know me. Let's go, Egwene. Come on. And it takes one finger from S-1, just one finger, to stop them. And even Nynaeve stops and she's glancing at that finger real quick. I mean, there's the acting in some of these scenes is freaking phenomenal. And this is one of them. Nynaeve's reactions to all of this is just 100% on point. Nonetheless, that's what happens, and she starts to explain, hey, the pattern doesn't give a shit what you want. It's going to tell you to do what you need to do. And, the Dark One's coming, and your actions from here on out are going to have an impact. You've been called to greatness. And then Egwene's like, okay, called to greatness. What do we need to do? Very Egwene thing. I like that. I like the way that particular scene ends. All right, so now let's get to where we start to fall apart a little bit in the episode. I think it was strong, and this is kind of the beginning of the end for me. While I love the scene itself with, S-1 saying it's exile is the penance, and you're going to swear on the oath rod. And I love this scene how Moiraine changes the verbiage to not be swearing to the position of the Amyrlin seat, but be swearing to Siuan Sanche, and the way that she says, I will honor and obey Siuan Sanche, daughter of the river, clever as a pike, strong as the tides. It feels more like a wedding vow, which I kind of liked. But it was just very, as much as I love this scene, it's very unnecessary and very big departure from the books. They don't use the oath rod like that. So I don't know if they were just trying to solidify that, hey, this means Moiraine really can't come back. If they're trying to show, hey, this is the oath rod that we're talking about that they take the 3 oaths on. I don't know what they were thinking, but I don't. As much as I love the scene, I don't think it was necessary. I think they could have filled it with something else that could have fixed some of the other issues they've had in this episode, like the forced exposition of the Eye of the World, or some of the things I'm going to bring up a little later. So I think that while I love it, I don't think it was necessarily, and I don't think I like the fact that they threw it in there with the oath rod. What I did like is at the end of the scene, Moiraine leaving and seeing her sisters turn her back on her, and that just broke my heart to see that, and you could tell that it's breaking her heart knowing that she has to walk out and leave. I will say that she spends more time in the tower than is shown on screen, because she changes and everything, as you can see here in this picture of her leaving Tar Valon. And keep in mind, this means that she can't come back to the tower. She can still go inside the city gates, can cross everything. She can be in the city of Tar Valon. She cannot be in the White Tower. So that is, very specific. Words have meanings. Exact verbiage is important, and how we use it matters. So just keep that in mind. Now let's talk about the Waygate scene. I guess I got to start with the Waygate. It's a cool looking thing. It's a cool looking structure. It is not a freaking Waygate. I don't like this change. I think that that leaving the Waygate the way it actually looks in the books, or at least trying to do that, would have looked cooler. I don't know why they didn't do it. So that is what it is. Maybe they're just thinking, hey, somebody would just pick off, one of the Aes Sedai would have picked up that Tree of Life leaf, the Avendasora leaf, and not had it there, so it would have been closed from this side at least. Maybe that's what they're thinking, but I don't like the look of it. The fact that, and even the fact that she has a channel to open it doesn't bother me. We actually get a really cool picture of her channeling up here. With that Trinity braid up there. I cannot remember the name. It's a Celtic knot, similar to the Triskelion, but it's not that same one. But that's a really cool, visual. So I don't mind that. It's just the way the Waygate looks bothers me. Additionally, she clearly does need loyal. She kind of mentioned it to him earlier that, hey, the pattern has presented a way around a problem. I definitely talking about loyal, and they haven't went into that connection between the Ogier and the Ways yet, but I think they will later. But clearly they still need him probably to navigate and read the Ogier script as they're going through the Ways. That being said, he starts to give a little exposition as to what the Ways are. Says, they exist out of space and time. It's okay, that's a fine enough explanation. A step there might be 100 miles here. Wonderful. Moiraine cuts him off because she doesn't want them to be scared and doesn't want them to know too much about it. That being said, what she does tell them frustrates the crap out of me. So when she finally starts to give her exposition dump to the Emmonsfield Five and to the non-book reading audience, it is a failure all around, in my opinion. So first of all, she says, it's the fastest way to the eye of the world. Okay, I don't mind that so much. It's the fastest way to Fal Dara, technically, but okay. I'm okay with it. And then she says, they say, why the eye of the world? It is where the Dark One is imprisoned. Nope. He's imprisoned in Shayol Ghul. There's no reason to change that. And Aes Sedai would know, if nothing else, that one fact. On top of that, she's like, the Dark One's there. He's weakened. We need to take him out while he's weakened. Again, no. There are times when they have called, Baalzamon the Dark One in the books. For like 3 books they do this. And she consistently says, that's not the Dark One. You didn't kill the Dark One. The Dark One's not free yet. Otherwise there would be nothing here. That's not the Dark One. Moiraine knows that. So I cannot stand that change whatsoever. And then her saying if we don't defeat him now while he's weak, then there's going to be thousands of Trollocs and Murdrell, and when the next stage finally turns, it's going to be built upon the ashes of this one. No. Your own series established that if the Dark One wins, they're breaking the wheel, which is what he's trying to do in the books. You've already established that's what he's trying to do in the series by Danya, a dark friend. Why the hell wouldn't Moiraine know that? That part really aggravates the shit out of me. Overall, I found that whole exposition dump as a failure. That didn't kill the episode. It doesn't kill the series. But I do have problems with a lot of these scenes towards the end of this. I think that the end of this episode really hurts the episode as a whole. Part of that is beyond their control, I think. There is a line going back to the Siuan thing that I think is very interesting. And that is her saying, whoever comes between the Dragon Reborn and the Dark One will die. There's more to that than is being said and then what is being implied. You'll have to wait until my theory video to hear more on that. All that being said, I don't mind the way the ways themselves look. I'm not sure about the lightning. I'd have to go back and reread The Eye of the World and get back into the headspace of the ways. Don't remember lightning being there, but it's not a touch that I mind so much because it helps add to that foreboding nature. And then you have the end where Matt doesn't go with them, it appears. I don't think, so first of all, yeah, big departure from the books, but let's get away from that for a second. And let's start with the fact that I don't think that this is the way the showrunners intended this scene and the end of this episode to go. I think Matt was supposed to go with them. This is purely conjecture and just my thoughts. I have no solid evidence. Nobody's told me this. Rafe Judkins and them haven't come out and said it yet that I know of. But we all know that Barney Harris stops being, Matt Cawthon. They've recast him for season 2. There are some rumors that he wouldn't be in the last 2 episodes of the season. And this episode, I think, is the one that was where they had to take a break. I think some of these scenes they had to take a break because of the pandemic. And they had to come back. And I think that when they came back, maybe that is when Barney Harris didn't come back. This is everything in the scene, the shots of him at a distance and him kind of thinking, looking down, are all shots that were established earlier in this scene. And it's not that hard to just basically Photoshop out everybody else and put that behind them looking outside of the Waygate. So I think that that's the explanation here as to why Matt's not going with them. I don't think that was the intended storyline, but I think that it's the kind of thing that happens when you're doing a live adaptation. That this is why you have professional writers for the screen, because they know how to work around that stuff, and hopefully they do a good job of working around that. I also hope that Barney Harris in all of his roles does wonderful and has a great career, and I really hope that the new guy who comes in to play Matt next season is also wonderful. Nonetheless, let's continue with the rest of this breakdown, which is really just the final thoughts. It's not a bad episode. I think that it was hurt a lot by a bad last 7 minutes, at least from a book reader perspective. From a non-book reader perspective, no issues there. But from a book reader, some of the changes are just, those changes are kind of baffling to me. I don't know why they did them. Maybe I'll figure it out later. Maybe they'll explain later. Maybe there's reasons for it. Maybe this, them not knowing that he's trapped in Shayol Ghul and thinking that potentially this, that, let's be honest, Ishamael is the Dark One. Maybe that's all because these, prophecies are 3,000 years old and been translated. Who knows? But I do think that overall the episode is hurt by the ending. It probably would have been a solid 8, maybe even 9 for me. That's part of why I marked it down to like a 6.5, 7 for the episode, was because I did not like the ending there. Overall, still some questions. How are they going to deal with Matt staying behind? Where the hell is the dagger? They didn't go back and look at that. That's definitely a departure from the books. She like kept close hold of that dagger when she could. Like Matt had to carry it around with him, but when they eventually separated from him, they put that damn thing in a lead box and we're going to shove this in a vault and never speak of it again. So that aspect is a little odd to me that it was never touched on. I think it will get touched on later. Where's Paddon Fane? I didn't see him. In the comments, if you saw him in this episode, let me know. Additionally, who is that person that Leandrin is meeting in North Harbor? Is it Paddon Fane? Is it a dark friend? Is it a lover? Is it the Sanchan? So those are the questions I have about this episode. Hopefully you guys have some questions too, and we can get some theories as the discussion started, either in the comments, on Twitter, wherever you like to talk to people at the Wheel of Time. Before I go, don't forget to click that like, subscribe, and bell icon to be notified whenever I come out with new content. And until the next turning of the wheel, have a great day.